This is Daisuke Beppu, and I hope all of you are doing very well today. There has been some sad news in the film community in that the film director, Nicolas Roeg, has passed away. Now, I received a very nice message from our dear friend and a friend to the community, Tim, and he very kindly suggested that I take the time to talk about Nicolas Roeg very briefly in the way that I am able to. And I thought about that, and I thought it was a very good suggestion from our dear friend. So, taking his suggestion earnestly, I'd like to speak about the films of Nicolas Roeg that appear in the Criterion collection. So perhaps this might be an opportunity to celebrate his career and his output, his cinematic output. And there are a number of his films that are included in the Criterion collection. Not all of them, but a number of them, and I dare say the ones that are in the Criterion collection are quite famous and iconic in terms of representing his filmography, and some very landmark level films. So without further ado, let's just go over very briefly the films of Nicolas Roeg that appear in the Criterion collection. Spine number 10 is Walkabout. This is a film from 1971, and it is a deceptively simple tale, but it's told with such complexity and skill and dexterity that I dare say that it is a contemporary film masterpiece. There are many layers to the film, and I don't want to discuss too many details about it lest I spoil it for any of our viewers who have yet to see this remarkable film. But this is a really memorable one. It has many different things going on below the surface, and indeed on the surface itself there are many vivid images at play, very interesting character development, and some quite keen insights into human nature and the place of human nature in the context of progress, and also in the context of being in the elements, so to speak. So it is a true masterwork, very memorable, incredibly easy to follow, and if you are looking for an entry point with respect to the works of Nicolas Roeg, I dare say that this is probably a fine entry point, place to begin with respect to his work, and maybe based on this you can judge for yourself if his work is worth pursuing for your own cinematic journey. Now, anyway, Walkabout, spine number 10. Spine number 303 from 1980. This is the film Bad Timing. Now, as of this video, which is November 2018, this particular release is only available through the Criterion collection in DVD. So if you are not into DVD, then perhaps this is not for you, but I would still strongly suggest this film. It is a very tough watch. There are some very intense scenes and some really difficult scenes to watch. It is quite a harrowing watch. And for those who might be not into very sort of explicit scenes, then perhaps this film is not necessarily for you, and that's perfectly fine, and a legitimate approach to take to cinema. So don't get me wrong, I don't want to force anything upon you that is unpleasant or something that is disagreeable for your viewing tastes. However, if you are okay with an intense watch, a film that includes, as I say, some very graphic scenes, then I think this film has a lot of challenging rewards in store for anyone who is going to approach this film for the first time. It has towering performances Teresa Russell and Art Garfunkel, an intensity that has rarely been matched. There is a real understanding of human nature, and in particular the human nature and how humans interact with each other in the context of a relationship, and the role of sexuality in the relationship. You know, the idea that sexuality can be both a beautiful thing, a lovely thing on the one hand, and on the other hand can be a potentially dangerous thing and frightening thing on the other. So this is a film that is filled with much nuance, difficult nuance, sometimes nuance that is very hard to stomach. And therefore, I don't necessarily recommend it to everyone. But for those who are into the works of Nicolas Roeg, this is a film that needs to be seen by those of you who are okay with his with the kinds of intense subject matter that he usually deals with in his films. And it is a towering portrait of a relationship in the true Roeg style. Highly recommended. It is indeed one of my favorite films in the Criterion collection. Incredibly intense and unforgettable. So this is bad timing. The next one is Spine number 304 from 1976. This is unfortunately out of print in the Criterion collection, but it is still available through other labels' releases, and I'm sure there are other ways to obtain this film or to watch this film without necessarily having to rely upon an out-of-print Criterion collection release. This is, of course, the film The Man Who Fell to Earth, and it is remarkable in the sense that it has a truly outstanding performance given by David Bowie. And it is, again, told in the wonderful, fragmented style and editing and bravura that we have come to know the director Nicolas Roeg by. And he is truly just a master at work here in a very interesting story. It is a science fiction story, but it is told in very real and grounded terms, if you know what I mean. So therefore, it is a richly told tale, and it's a tale which has, again, the same landmark and trademark complexity in terms of human relationships. So in fact, it is a science fiction story at heart, but I think true to its soul, it is a film that is about relationships. And in that sense, it is a remarkable film, a disturbing film in many respects, and it's a film that will stay with you soon after it is finished. The Man Who Fell to Earth, a truly one-of-a-kind viewing experience. This happens to be the Blu-ray, which is in the Digipack and with the slipcover. I also have the out-of-print DVD release, which is here, which is notable in that it comes with the book, The Man Who Fell to Earth. So anyway, again, this is OOP, unfortunately, but again, don't let that stop you from trying to find it through other labels, and that's perfectly fine. And it's certainly a film that deserves as much attention as possible. So again, for your consideration, The Man Who Fell to Earth. Spy number 566 from 1985. So this is the film called Insignificance. Again, this is with Teresa Russell. And I must admit that of all the films by Nicolas Roeg in the Criterion collection, this is the one that probably I find that I engage with the least. And I think that means that I should watch it again. It has a very fragmentary style. There are different characters here. There is kind of a theatrical play-like quality to it, and there is a certain it's like a play, and there is a certain theatricality at work, and perhaps at first glance that theatricality might seem to work against the film, but perhaps the more I think about it, the more I realize that there is a theatricality that runs throughout the course of all the films that are contained in the Criterion collection by Nicolas Roeg. So the more I think about it, the more I realize that perhaps this film is truly fitting within the framework of his filmography, at least up to 1985. So I really should give this one a second viewing, or a third viewing actually, as I've seen it twice before. But I really should do that. In fact, I think I will set it aside and watch it again after I finished making this video. So Insignificance, this is Spine number 566, and perhaps you are a fan of this film, and again, if you are, please let me know, and I'd love to hear your comments about this, and perhaps that will inspire me to look at this film in a different light. And I will certainly give it another chance after I finished making this video. So Insignificance, I will set it aside right now. Next, Spine number 745, Don't Look Now. This is from 1973. This is the famous horror film with Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie. But to call it a horror film, I think, is only a partial description, because it is really a film about loss, and it's a film about a couple trying to deal with loss. And in that sense, it is a truly typical work by this director, who is so obviously concerned about the nature of relationships and how human beings react with each other and connect with each other and collide with each other in the context of human relationships, whether they be the relationship of a man and maybe a husband and wife, or a couple, or a brother and sister. Again, how we react in the context of a relationship with another human being. So here we have that interplay set within the narrative crux of loss, and then you have this whole horror element that's added onto it. So we have a real, truly delightful and quite mesmerizing and sincerely frightening and disturbing film from 1973. And there are some very famous moments of human intimacy and of quite shocking violence. And there is a real disturbing quality to the nature of sound and music and editing, and this really lush locale in Italy that all comes together to form this real cohesive whole. Don't Look Now. I once made a video some time back about some recommendations of horror films in the Criterion collection, and much to my I think I made a fundamental error in that video, because I did not include this film in that video, and I really should have. And many of you very astutely pointed out my oversight. You were very correct to point that out, because this really is a horror film in the truest sense of the word, I would say, because horror, really great horror, has a way of showing us the true nature of horror in things that we can understand and relate to the most. And here we can see the idea of horror in the sense of the context of this loss, and this idea of drive, and how we deal with loss, and how some people deal with loss in one way and how other people deal with it in another way. And it's set within this context, and there is a real lovely metaphor type of mystery at play. So this is a real highly charged horror film that really gets at the heart of certain aspects of human nature that have the potential of being quite horrific, and thus it is a really remarkable and unforgettable film viewing experience. Don't Look Now. So, yes, so that is the quick run-through of the films of Nicolas Roeg in the Criterion Collection. There are, of course, other films that he has done that have yet to be introduced into the Criterion Collection. Maybe you know the film Eureka, which is under the Masters of Cinema line, as far as I am aware. I think I have it somewhere here, in fact. And also there is Performance, which I think has been released, for example, in a Warner Archive Blu-ray, which I also have. There have also been, well, there's also another film. He has a number of other films in his later filmography, of course, but one of the films that I really cherish is the film The Witches. Do you know this film? Which is based on the story by Roald Dahl. And I saw this film when I was kind of a kid growing up, and it's really frightened the socks off me. It's just so scary, and it's such a wonderfully scary film for kids. It's one of those things that's probably too intense for young viewers, but when you see it, you'll never forget it. And only later did I realize that, in fact, it was Nicolas Roeg who directed that film. And when I began to learn more about him as I grew older, it was a really nice way to connect him with a film that I was really fond of as a child. So that was a really nice discovery I made later in my life. But then, of course, there are the Criterion Collection film releases of his works. So yes, so that has been a quick run-through of his films in the Criterion Collection. If you have any comments or questions about the works of Nicolas Roeg as they appear in the Criterion Collection, I'd love to hear them. Please feel free to leave a comment below. And if you, and I will do my best to try to address them to the best of my ability. Perhaps there are some Nicolas Roeg films that you think are truly memorable and have certain meaning and significance to you personally. If so, I'd love to hear your story and your reaction to that particular film of his. It's a very unfortunate news about his passing, and of course, it's a very on the one hand, it's a very unfortunate thing to have someone's death be the way in which we celebrate or discuss his work. But at the same time, I think it's also very it's appropriate, I think, to remember him and to remember his work and to remember the works that he left behind, and just recall that he was a real vital voice, really challenging voice in the landscape of contemporary cinema. And so I think his loss is quite profound, and it's a very sad thing to lose him. But again, there are the films that he has left behind. So he has left behind a wonderful legacy, a challenging one, sometimes a very difficult filmography to engage in on certain levels, but that I don't think is a bad thing necessarily. I think it's a very potentially good thing and potentially rewarding thing in terms of viewing experience. Okay, my friends, let me leave you, and I hope you are doing well. And until we meet again, please take care.